Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So for those who are here, I really appreciate you coming, though it's a bit rainy and strange weather. For those who are following us via live stream, I also welcome everyone for following up on Sunday afternoon. But the topic is quite relevant, it's current, and I have wonderful guest speakers here. I tried to have actually a gender balance because Europe is moving into this direction. Unfortunately, I was turned down by the European Commission, and Maria Silvia Gata, though being announced in the program, unfortunately could not participate with us. And this is something that we can also work on for our future events, because it's the first time we are launching a new program, and with a quite interesting title, so New Creative Europe Media, Let's Push Our Boundaries. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. So, as you could see, we started this panel with first news. This year we are celebrating 30 years of the Media sub-program, and it's the only program at the European level fostering European audiovisual industry. And actually media is the perfect example how we can push our boundaries. As Alejandro González Iñárritu would say, cinema is universal, beyond flags and borders and passports. So I welcome my dear guests, wonderful speakers. On my right side, we have a state secretary from the Ministry of Culture and Media, Krešimir Partl. Welcome. On my left side, we have CEO Luís Chaby, who is here with double personality. He's the CEO of the ICA, so our counterpart in terms of the Croatian Audiovisual Film Center, but he's also the CEO of the EFAD. It's the very important institution helping stakeholders and film funds, especially those who are coming from diverse capacity countries, to advocate and echo our concerns and challenges when it comes to European funds. And last but not least, my dear CEO, Christopher Peter Marcich, the CEO of the Croatian Audiovisual Film Center. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, now I ask my wonderful technical team to continue with a small presentation. Those who know me, they are aware that I need some data. And I devoted a lot of my time to analyze every single project in the Media sub-program for the period 2014-2020. And this is what I came up with. So maybe we move to the next slide, please. This is a wonderful visual for today. So we will stop here. So media needed to be introduced because European film in the past was fighting for its deserved attention and the circulation, and basically this was the moment when Europe was unified and it introduced the media program in 1991. And when it comes to Croatia, we entered before actually becoming the full European Union's member on the 17th of March 2008, and we continued to be quite involved in the next period, 2014-2020. Next, please. Short, but important to mention. So what was before? We had the budget 1.46 billion of euros, and 56% was devoted to media, because media, unlike culture and cross-sectorial sub-program, has at the time had 14 calls. And yes, we had introduction of new calls, and game developers also entered the game. Next, please. And this is what I was analyzing. So in the previous period, we had 39 countries, and it was quite competitive because it's not only the countries of the European Union participating in the media, but also all those having a special agreements and being either full members or the partial. And 11,522 projects were supported with the 736 million of euros. Next, please. Now, coming to very interesting slide. Out of those 736 million of euros, big five, so France, UK, Germany, Spain and Italy, would take 57.6% of the total budget. Medium, having a total of 9 countries like Austria, Denmark, Finland, all those Scans and I say the Dutch-speaking countries, they would take 31%, and small, including Portugal and Croatia, with having 4 partial membership countries, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine and Tunisia, 11.4%. So a total of 25, only 11.4% of the total budget, big 5, 57.6%. Next, please. So now when you see, in terms of the projects, small countries are taking the most, so 38.8%, with a total number of 4,469 projects, which means that for a lot of projects, we get the less funding per project, but also in total. And of course, big 27.9 and medium 33.3. Now let's move to the future. Next, please. So now, number 3 is very important. We have more money, 2.4 billion, so 58% would go to media, but we also have 17 calls. So we will have 39 countries in the end. Right now we have officially 35, but we are also waiting for those 4 participating partially to join in, and we all know that it's not easy to join media in terms of the prerequisites. And then we have the number 3. So we need to ensure that in the new program we will ensure gender balance, so that we are not only women or men on the panel, so that we have a mix. Then we will need to ensure the collaboration. So today we are not only collaborating with Portugal and Croatia, but we will try to go even beyond. And finally, it's the moment of greening, and purposely I'm put it in greening, so we are trying to take care of sustainable environment, and this is something that we're going to tackle in terms of the film shooting and similar, because, dear producers, you are going to be asked in your applications how you're going to do it now. And yes, we have 3 sub-programs, so we have culture, media is film, culture is all the rest, and then you have cross-sectorial, something going on there with Creative Innovation Lab, and voila, we have the introduction of journalism. So the Ministry of Culture and Media will also take care of the call for the journalists, because it's important that with all this situation we also have that we fight fake news, that we have educated journalists, and that we introduce also media literacy. Next, please. This is very in the nutshell. 3 clusters, so content will be focused on the development, and there will be 5 calls right now. The open ones are for the co-development, single, mini slate funding, and TV, including the online content. Then we have business, because media is also business-oriented, and distribution is the main focus, but also training initiatives like talents and skills, markets and networking, innovative tools. This is bridging. This is online promotion. My apologies. Media, wonderful media 360. At the moment, we don't know what is going to be introduced, but we will find out next year, as well as with European film distribution and film sales. And the last but not the least is the audience. So festivals, cinemas. We have introduction of the new call regarding the VOD platforms, and voila, all of a sudden we have audience development introduced again, including the film education, and there will be only one call where Arte will take the money, and it's related to subtitling of the films, but it's going to be introduced next year. Next. Thank you for being patient with me. The 3 highlights. I'm following the new program rules, and the 3 highlights will be addressed through our panel. So it's the level playing field, transparency of the results and overall when it comes to the news and the calls, and diversity of the European films, because this is something that we need to address throughout the all calls. Next, please. And finally, we come to the first topic, and it's regarding the content. We were quite surprised that the European Commission divided small countries into 2 groups. So, because we were very good in the last period, so Portugal and Croatia, now we are called a bit successful, and we are, how shall I say, high capacity in terms of those 2 groupings of the low capacity. And the group B will be all the rest, as you can see, Albania, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and etc. It's important to know that group A will consist of Croatia, Czech Republic, Estonia, Greece, Poland is no longer medium capacity, but it's also part of our gang, and Portugal. Luckily, we will have a call specially introduced for low capacity countries, and it's mini slate. And when it comes to the collaboration, the co-development will force and foster, let's put it in a nice way, producers to collaborate not only with your neighbors, but, for example, like with Portugal. And when it comes to TV, you will need to also now introduce throughout all these COVID times, how do you collaborate with VOD platforms? But there is no guarantee that the VOD platforms will keep or give you your IP rights. This is still under negotiation. So let me start with Croatian. I like to introduce what's going to happen, but let's see how we did it and how we actually helped Croatian audiovisual film industry during those COVID-19 times, because we are still kind of getting out, but then COVID-19 strikes back. And I'm not sure that we are aware that everybody knows how we actually helped the Croatian audiovisual film sector. So I would like to start with Mr. Partl.
Thank you, Martina. It's true, like you said, every time we think that the COVID crisis is coming to an end, it strikes back. And we're monitoring what other European and worldwide countries do, and there is nobody has found a way to actually cope with it because it's very unpredictable. We try to find some measures how to help the industry, and I'm talking about the culture and creative industry in whole. But when you find something that can help them, then the situation with the pandemic changes. So it's not really easy. Since the start of the pandemic in Croatia in March last year, we adopted a series of measures to help the industry and culture in whole. We made an effort to find in the state budget more than 80 million euros to help the culture and creative sector, some of which are loans with 100% guarantee from the state that we made through the temporary framework state aid of the European Commission. Some of it are grants or direct help to artists. Also in cooperation with Chris and the Audiovisual Center, we gave the producers extra funding so they can cope with the pandemic situation and get masks and disinfectants and everything they needed to work through the pandemic crisis. And also, again, with the Audiovisual Center, we gave extra funding to films that were in production so they can finish the movies. And I said actually yesterday at the opening of the Pula Film Festival, we have to be very proud that some of the movies managed to finish productions, and actually one of our movies also won a prize at the Cannes Festival. So it can be done, but it's really hard through regular times, and especially in these times of the pandemic crisis. Also, what is very important, through the Recovery and Resilience Fund, we made an extra effort and negotiated with the Commission to have a fund of 30 million euros of grants to the culture and creative sector. So we think this will help our sector to somehow push through the pandemic, and we also hope that this will end sometime. Also, I agree with Martina, and she made a great presentation. It is important at this time of the pandemic for Europe to come together. And we spoke about it at the start of the pandemic. It's not good for countries to close their productions into themselves. We have to have more cooperation at the European level. And also I think that the European Commission has to set some rules, and I will speak about that later, about the streaming platforms, and also about one problem that I think that awaits us, and this is the window between the distribution in cinemas and distributions to streaming platforms. If we lose that window, cinemas throughout Europe will be in problem, and I think this is something that we'll have to address. If Europe negotiates with big digital companies as a whole, we are much stronger than when small countries have to do it by themselves. So I think this is a topic that it will be raised in the next couple of years, and I think even sooner, because this pandemic has pushed something that should have happened maybe through the next 5 years. It happened through 1 year. I think this is enough for the beginning.
Yeah, you entered also my slide. We are stopping at the content, so because I want to compare also how Portugal did it. Thank you, Krešimir.
Well,
or you want to choose it from also EFAD?
I think I can do both. I think I can do both, and maybe start for. Well, first of all, thank you for your kind invitation to be in this panel. Congratulations to all the Croatians on the prize won in Cannes. I feel a little bit like my own prize, because I come also from a small country, and each time that someone like our kind of movies, our kind of storytelling wins something important, I think it's also important for a country like mine. So congratulations to all. It was and at the end it was a great movie, so I was very pleased to see it yesterday, and I am very happy for the results. Well, addressing directly your question, and I will start from what was the perspective from the EFAD. So it was obvious since the first days of the pandemic that this would cause a huge effect on the cultural sector, and especially on the audiovisual and cinema sector. As you know, productions were stopped, film theaters were closed, festivals were delayed or they were cancelled. So for all that was the environment that we used to work with, it was a major shock, and it created a huge impact. So since the first days at the EFAD level, we managed to try to have first of all a common answer, and try to share experiences between our countries. And we tend to share all the small details of each response in order to see to each country if they were applicable to our own reality. That's what we did in Portugal. So we tried to follow all the major experiences that were out there, and try to pick some of them that we will think that were applicable to our own reality. So like here, we managed to create also in Portugal a special budget for answering the crisis that was aimed especially for producers, theaters, distributors, and festivals. It was an extra budget of approximately 8 million euros on top of our annual budget, and that would allow all the companies to have their own films and their own companies still working during the first stage of the pandemic. Also on the ministry level, it was launched a special line for with a more social security approach. So just answering all the technicians and all the people that were out of the job suddenly. And that was created also with very huge impact and a very positive impact. So, and obviously, as Mr. Secretary of State was saying, this is not going to end here. This was just the first line of defense against this pandemic. And it was also a good opportunity just to realign our perspectives, our priorities. And I think it was, at the end, the result was actually I came out of this very optimistic regarding the future. Right now, not only we gain some visibility on the government level in terms of what is required to have a proper response for the cultural sector, and especially for the audiovisual sector. And as we know, sometimes when things are easy or on easy times, it's not easy to get that message out there. So, well, in a nutshell, I would say that the responses from the Croatian government and ours were pretty much aligned, and they were also being monitored by the EFAD, and the answer was basically the same in all the countries. So it was, I think we were all very quickly to respond, and that's why films like the one we saw yesterday was capable to still working, still finishing their editing job, and still releasing in time to be launched in Cannes. So we managed to do that. So we'll see what the future will reserve us, but I'm quite optimistic that we're still going to have very good content in the near future.
Thank you. So, dear Chris, is there something that was missing from their perspectives and that you would like to add?
Thank you, Martina.
You can also choose which head. You have three heads.
I'm here as a reserve player.
Okay.
There were supposed to be 2 women from the commission who were supposed to be here, who are not. And at one point, Gilles Jean, who was the managing director of EFAD, was supposed to be here. So gender diversity we had as an objective. We failed, but I don't think we can take the full responsibility for that. The idea was there when we were discussing the need for this sort of a discussion. I think that, first of all, to complement what Luís said, the EFAD group has been an extremely important partner for all of us, but especially smaller countries, in terms of information sharing, but also in terms of advocacy. I think there's been a lot of work done in Brussels to make people more aware of some of the issues we'll be talking about later. Probably underappreciated because maybe we don't do enough PR on what we're doing, but it's very active and very important. Without EFAD, we would not have a real voice as Group A countries in European policy, as far as I'm concerned, as in terms of the functions we address. So that's very important. I think it's also worth recalling for the next phase of this panel some of the dates Martina mentioned. 1991, the beginning of the media program, that happened at a time of seismic legal and policy changes at the European level. It was the time that the Television Without Frontiers directive was introduced, the first time Europe would have a real common policy that was meant to promote European production, European works through quotas, through obligations, and it worked. It worked very well. There were many big players, big television companies, big American companies claiming it would be the death of audiovisual in Europe, and it was really quite the contrary. It was enlightened policy that delivered results. We are at another turning point where we should be able to do the same thing with the same political courage that Europe showed in 1991, when it was a smaller club. There were, I think, at the time about 12 member states going to 15. Luís, I think Portugal was in the process of joining. But it was an important turning point, and with it came the media program. And the media program's purpose, in part, was to accompany the political decisions and legal decisions that were taken at the European level with concrete support measures that would enable Europe to rise to the challenge and to enhance its production and enhance cross-border cooperation between the member states. And there, the results have, certainly the production, if you look at the numbers, speak for themselves. Cross-border is something that Europe continues to strive for, not as successfully as increasing national production, but they continue to work on it. So I think it's important as background to understand that these policy measures that are taken can have a good and a serious practical result in the marketplace. In terms of coping with the pandemic, I think the State Secretary said most of it. Our role at the center was in part to deal with the extreme anxiety that existed in the community when individuals who live on a project-by-project basis, festivals that depended on physical events, calls for tenders that had procedures that were impractical during the COVID, all required special attention, and we did try to address all of those. We enabled the festivals to continue in an online version, adapting our procedures. Calls for tenders continued to be processed, and thanks to the ministry, we continued to function at our normal budget level, which was not the case in many countries in Europe. And we processed all of the calls regularly, even had an earthquake that tried to disrupt our work, but we kept on trucking. Some of my team were wearing helmets in the office after the earthquake for a while, but we managed and introduced some support programs towards the end of the year to re-energize production of Croatian films. I think that longer term, the European funds that are there that everybody's talking about will need to be deployed to deal with some of the structural uncertainties, because I think long term there is more disruption than we're really talking about now in terms of production capacities and structures that we will need to reinforce in order to be able to continue to produce. So I'll stop there, Martina. If I have missed something, you'll remind me.
Yes, I will. So I will still remain with this slide. We will definitely go back to the games that platforms play, but just to tackle some things that might be issues in the new program. I mean, new program, we've really waited the announcements of the calls and on behalf of the European Commission, and they came late. We know that the member states couldn't agree on certain calls and award criteria, and dividing actually small countries into two different subgroups. How shall I say? I understand that once you are successful, you belong to a certain category, but I'm afraid that this might cause even more challenges, especially for Portugal and Croatia, for example, belonging to the first grouping. From those three clusters, content, I would say, is the biggest chunk of chunk of the cake goes to the business sector, because distribution is on the first place at the European level, because we need to help European films to circulate. Reality is a bit different, but for low audiovisual capacity countries, content is rather important. And this is something that I'm trying to advocate, not only as the media desk, but also when discussing with the representatives of the European Commission. We are not trying to compensate the financing missing, but we are trying to also, with the media funds, be as competitive as other countries belonging to the high and medium capacity category. And we definitely need media in the future. But when it comes to the content, not sure, Luís, if you were aware, but for example, smaller countries will have this request of proof of producing the audiovisual work and then distributing the same work outside your national country in at least 3 countries. It means that we are equalizing.
And festivals don't count.
Yes, and festivals don't count. So this is something that is a bit worrisome and that we're also trying to address via EFAD, because co-development was kind of, how shall I say, prerequisite for our films. And how do you stand in terms of efforts advocating this, and how we can actually count on you when we would need to maybe address this as a problem?
Well, the question as you raise it is quite obvious for us. The EFADs since always have been defending that all the European policies should address the necessity of a proper range of projects, a proper range of countries represented, and that we should protect the creativity and the cultural approach of each project. I'm not sure that the solution that was created is going to tackle this objective, and so we see it with lots of concerns, especially because, well, the question is that we are choosing as a criterion something that was done in the past by a producer, and that will obviously will benefit those producers coming from countries with a story of success. So this creates also a kind of a generation gap between producers from new that are getting right now to the market and those who are here for a long time, and also this obviously will create a proper ground for those who are already known, who come from stronger markets, who come from stronger cultural backgrounds. For countries like ours, that are their point of departure it's really far behind, and we don't have any real capacity to address them in terms of promotion or distribution, or even gaining the interest by sales agents or distributors to buy our catalog. This will become a huge challenge for us. So we see it with a major concern. I'm not sure this will reflect a common position by the EFAD, because, as you know, we are 39 film funds.
Well.
We don't share exactly the same point of views in all the range of subjects, and we have among ourselves countries like France or Germany that obviously have a different approach from ours. But we will definitely raise the question, because for us it's crucial that the European programs will definitely help the content that is hard to get out there to be easier to be funded. So, well, at least from the Portuguese Film Fund, obviously you can count with our firm disposition to fight back.
And just to rely on what you said, like for example, the animation is quite expensive, but unfortunately festivals don't count, and it's going to be very difficult for animators to prove such a criteria. I'm not going to tackle
and documentaries as well.
And documentaries are also underestimated in terms of also the funding, and it's those two genres are a bit risky, and this is something that needs to be addressed also via different sub-organizations of documentary filmmakers and similar. But I'm not going to go into details, because this is something that is waiting for you on Tuesday. I'm just tackling challenges, possible challenges that you need to be aware now. Can I have my next slide, please? Because now we are coming to the juicy part. I kind of put two clusters in comparison because business, and I need to repeat because I did a mistake, it takes a huge part of the cake. And then we have also the audience cluster, and those are the little highlights that I would like to address now. And it's regarding training and skills, like for example, participants coming from Croatia or Portugal will not be allowed to apply for scholarships if they want to attend any trainings, because we are now in the better grouping because we were successful in the last period. And the Croatian Audiovisual Film Center offers scholarships, so yes, so no scholarships for Croatians, no Portuguese. Diversity and visibility of Eurofilm films in the brackets distribution. So from all those three clusters, the business one is the most non-transparent, I would say. It took me, I would say, a lot of time to analyze, I told you, every single project and especially every single film title to be distributed in the period 2014 and 20, and I will explain why. And it's a bit tricky, this kind of balancing versus Europa Cinemas versus European VOD networks, which one's going to win. And single festival versus festival networks, to explain for those who were not aware, but festivals were quite joined in this action to keep single festival scheme. So this was the first moment where all countries were joined together to keep the singular scheme, which means that Europe has a tendency to put all festivals into one network, by which we might lose our own specialties or our own national festivals, and this is not something that festivals agreed, and they fought and they won this battle. Not sure if they're gonna, if it's gonna remain like this. So, in terms of the distribution of European films, this is very interesting. So I need to come to my numbers. So I'm very happy when I see Croatian distributors receiving the funds, but they're receiving those funds for non-national European films. And I must say, you will see it also in the end, in the video, they are the second after 49 films, Croatian films being supported in the previous period. They're on the second place with almost 1.9 million euros. But in this 7-year period, only one Croatian film, and this is The High Sun, was sold via sales agent to different territories. Portuguese films, there is no Portuguese film being sold in this period, which is interesting. But you have, from Big Five, you have a total of 107 films. Medium, you have a total of 59. And from small countries, so a total of 21, 13 films being sold in this period, which means that there is no actually diversity and visibility of European films. Of course, when it comes to the money, so all those films from France, Germany, and similar were taking the most of it. So now we are having the new program, and we also have the other issue. So when it comes to the distribution, we lost, as the State Secretary mentioned, the cinema window, and everything is moving towards the VOD platforms, which are not guaranteeing the IP rights to producers when they're applying. So who would like to start? Maybe I start with the State Secretary because he likes this particular window issue, because in the new program, we need to protect also art house cinema, especially. And on the top, we also need to introduce directives that are supporting our national production when we fight these big players. So basically, in the new program, the focus will be, and due to the COVID-19 situation, that you also produce, but distribute more and more your films on the VOD platforms. So, Krešo, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Martina. Maybe just I will get back on the subject, but I forgot to say that the Croatia during this pandemic crisis, only at the start of March, had to close down cinemas, galleries, museum, and this only lasted for about 2 months. And later we stayed open the whole time. And we are one of the few countries that managed somehow to cope with the crisis and to have the culture open. And I think this is important for everybody. Now back to the subject. Well, as I said before, the pandemic crisis has pushed things, and things happened a bit sooner than we accepted. The streaming platforms have penetrated more and more into the homes of the people, and I will talk about the Croatia, but this happened in the whole Europe. And the cinemas had a fall in incomes in Croatia at one period more than 80% in compared to the 2019. And this is something that they will have trouble to find a way to cope with it in the future, and they lost a great deal of income. And I hope that through the Recovery and Resilience Fund, we will find a way somehow to help them to get back on their feet. And the problem, and the first, let's say, big movie was The Irishman, that was played primarily on Netflix, and the window from this point started to be a bit tightened. And later in the COVID crisis, what happened that the movies were going parallel on SVODs and in cinemas. And this is something that we're not happy about, because if cinemas loses big titles to SVODs, and I talked to the people in Croatia in the cinema industry, and when we compare this to premium VOD, this is maybe not so harsh like SVODs, because premium VOD costs. And SVODs, if you have a subscription to Netflix, it's like 10, I think 11 euros. And if you have a movie that's shown on the platforms, probably you won't go to the cinema. And this cannot be done by European countries individual, because as I said before, we are talking about really big companies, mostly coming from the United States. In the United States, the big companies find a way to agree with the cinema industry, and they lower their fees, so they somehow find an agreement. But I'm afraid what will happen in the European Union if we don't insist on this window, and maybe we can negotiate that this window can be less or more days. This is something that can be negotiable, but it has to exist if we want to keep the cinema industry alive. Because there are good sides from VODs, because the movies that are there are going worldwide, and this is good for the directors, producers, actors, for everybody to be seen out of the borders of their own countries. But also, I think that we have to be very careful in that part of the globalization. We now we have the law on electronic media that is going to be adopted in the fall in the parliament. I hope so. It's now in the procedure in the government. And Chris was actually calling me every day, Krešo, we need to do something about the streaming platforms, almost every day, actually, almost every day.
And always thinking of you.
And always think of me, and he was right. He was right. We have to keep in mind that the VOD platforms are penetrating more and more, and so in our law on electronic media, we have 2% for streaming platforms direct investment obligation to independent producer and 2% levy to the audiovisual center. And also maybe this is a good time to thank EFAD because they delivered to Chris information to the Ministry of Culture and Media about other countries and what they are planning to do, and this was very helpful. And I think all countries in the European Union have to make a stand and put an alignment in the law with the obligation of streaming platforms if we want to keep our industry rolling. Because we have two important issues. One is the contribution to the audiovisual center, and the other is a chance for the producers from the European Union to get to Netflix, to have a chance also with their titles to create new audiences. And I think if we make a stand together, we have a good chance.
So then I will switch to Portugal. How did you protect Portuguese presence in terms of the VOD platforms?
Okay, well, very complex question over here because we first of all we started by the chronology, and then we moved to the directive, and I can try to address both. Not only through a program like Creative Media, that obviously the cruelty of numbers show that we have some work to do, but also all the work that has been done, especially by the Commission, launching the Media Action Plan. That was obviously an effort, a huge effort to complement the work that was started by the approval of the directive. So we have a complex environment right now. On top of that, legal framework, COVID arrived. So we have the perfect storm to live in, which is good. And it means that we have to have a different approach to our legal framework that we had before. A couple of years ago, when we launched a new legal framework, everybody expected to be very sustainable and would create conditions in the market that would last for a decade or something. Right now, we are absolutely conscious that each time we approve something, probably 6 months ahead, it's going to be totally outdated. So this will require from everybody involved at the national level and the European level, a humble relationship with the law and a humble relationship with the results, and try to fine-tune every single time what is wrong with the laws at the European level or at the national level. So bearing this in mind, obviously from and starting by the windows that were referred here, I might agree that this could be a solution, but we have to understand this is not a common solution for European countries. So I would say, and from a personal point of view, that I see it a little bit difficult to find a common position on windows of release for titles. But I agree that we have to do something in order to protect art house movies. I'm not sure it's the Windows solution, but I'm sure we have to do something about it. Because as it was clear on your data, just because we have a European program in place doesn't mean that European content is out there and it's reaching their natural audiences. So we have to do something, and we have to find the better solutions in order to exhibitors who play the decisive role in adjusting their programs to what the audiences are requiring every single time. So we have to obviously keep paying attention to that. Getting into the transposition, well, and now from EFAD point of view, since the beginning, we found that this was a golden opportunity for us, for all of the countries, to modernize our legal framework in a national level, and that was done. So all the three main objectives that were present on the law. So I would say the creation of the European quota, the requirement of prominence of European works, and also the financial obligations that were for the first time imposed on platforms were gold for everybody, and we have to work on that environment. So we did it. In Portugal, as I believe it was done here, it was a very hard struggle with everybody. Everybody's got an opinion on this. For me and Chris, it's definitely hard to cope with every single data that is coming to us, and then try to make it a point of negotiation that will be handled by the proper people in charge. In this case, I believe it was Mr. Secretary of State, and it's hard to deal because the complexity of the environment we are dealing with. It's really hard to. So I totally understand what was the struggle here. It was kind of the same one we had back home. And the results are not that different. So we have obligation investment of 4%, and we have a levy of 1%. We can, well, as you know, in several different countries, we have several different solutions. 11 countries didn't transpose yet the directive, so we are still in the middle of the process. I'm sure we have not done everything absolutely right. But we have one good thing, I think, which is we have a mandatory obligation to review the law in 2 years now. So we are going to look at the effects of what that law has produced, and we have the capacity of changing what is not working so well. So, but yeah, it's as I said in the beginning of this part, this is not a story that ended. This will require from us a permanent struggle with data, with solutions, with European solutions that are out there, and we have to keep trying to get it right every single time, because what we have is very fragile and it's not done. And so that's it. That basically our work is just beginning, and we have to have a very humble approach to what is done. So when we reach to a solution like Croatia just recently, when we made it, we made the transposition. Well, it's just the beginning. You have to keep.
Of the next
The next one is just around the corner. So.